Hey guys, today we are in Galatians chapter 6. If you remember yesterday, I said chapters 5 and chapter 6 is how we should live, knowing that we are saved by faith and not by works. So yesterday we looked at we should live by spirit and not by the flesh. And today it gets a little bit more precise in how we do that, and that's simply just caring for one another. Verse 1, brothers, believers, ones who are saved by faith, if anyone is caught in any transgression, any sin, any stumbling, not just they sinned once, but that they're in a progression of sin, that they're doing something that they want to stop but they can't. You who are believers, spiritual, should restore or mend or repair him in the spirit of gentleness, in the spirit of the works of the Spirit: peace, love, joy, patience, all those things that we read yesterday in chapter 5. But keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. As we try to help people who are caught in sin, we have to be aware that we too can fall into sin, and that we would help them out of sin and not let those people drag us into sin. And so it's a part of the influence. We talked about that Sunday, right? Who's around you? Who's in your pyramid of friends? Who's influencing who? And so at times, even though we're good Christians and we're supposed to help out our fellow brothers and sisters, we must keep aware that Satan is constantly trying to drag us down. Verse 2, beware one another's burdens, their heavy load, and so fulfill the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? John chapter 13, to love one another. We see this many times out of John. We as brothers, as believers, are supposed to love one another, especially our brothers and sisters. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. We all have issues. But let each one test his own work, approve after testing, right? So, and for this reason, to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. So as we help one another, we are supposed to be aware that we can sin and make sure that we are not falling into that sin of helping our neighbor out. For each will have to bear his own load, his own obligations of life. Let the one who is taught the word share all good things with the one who teaches. That word share in the Greek is the word koinoneo. You would know the verb of that is koinonia, right? To share, to partnership. And so basically it says that we ought to share all good things, all spiritual and moral things. The teacher is to share the spiritual and moral things with the believer that's coming out of sin. We're not only to help them and tell them what's wrong, but we're to share in the good things that is happening and to bring them up, just not point out that they are in sin. Verse 7, do not be deceived, do not be led astray. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. God is not mocked. And that word mock means to turn your nose up. And God is not mocked. And we cannot just sin to continue just to keep on sinning. That's not how it works. For whoever one sows, he will also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh, to his own works, to his own deeds, will from the flesh reap corruption or reap decay. But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. Exactly what the other chapters have been about, right? If you sow to this world, to your flesh, to the works of this earth, you will be corrupted. You will come to decay. You will die. Eternally, right? But the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And once again, this word eternal is talking about the quality, not the duration. So in this idea, if you put everything in the works of this planet, of the works of this body, it's going to lead to a non-quality eternal life. But to those who believe in the Spirit, salvation is by faith, then they will have a quality eternal life. And so Paul is just reminding them, as we help our brothers and sisters to know where we are, but to also help our brothers and sisters see where they are. Verse 9, and let us not grow weary of doing good, exhausted. Do not let us grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap, and we do not give up. So then we have an opportunity. Let us do good to everyone, and especially those who are in the household of faith. And so here he's just talking about being good Christians, right? So then we have an opportunity. That word opportunity in the Greek is the word kairos. It's known as time. And so here Paul is saying, for we have a time, an opportunity. We have a time to let us do good. What is he talking about? We have a time on this earth that we are living to do good. And why would we do good? Because it points people to Jesus. When we do good, we're not acting like the world. We're not of the world. We're looking forward to God, who is good and who has saved us for good. And so when we are not like the world, it points people to God, to Jesus, who brought us what goodness is, brought us salvation. And so we should be good to everyone, but especially to those who are in the household of the faith, or especially to those who are believers. Verse 11, see with what large letters I'm writing with my own hand. We don't know exactly what this means. Was it a bigger font? Did he circle, italicize, underline? We're not sure what this means, but in the original letter, there would have been some kind of way that the original readers would have said, hey, this is important. It is those who want to make a good showing in the flesh. Remember, flesh is sin, works, who would force you to be circumcised. And that's the chief work, right? That's the chief work of the Old Testament. It's the beginning of the Mosaic law. And so he says there's some people who are working salvation by the flesh, and they want you to do this by being circumcised, and only in order that they may not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. People, these Judaizers who are adding to the salvation, adding to faith by works, are simply saying it's not by giving everything up to Christ. It's not by faith alone. It's by this too. And by doing that, when they're adding to faith, they're saying Jesus isn't enough, right? And so that line, it says that they may not be persecuted for the cross. They're not willing to suffer for Jesus. They're not willing to give everything to Jesus. So it's Jesus plus, right? And so he says, for even those who are circumcised do not themselves keep the law. Even the Jews and even the Judaizers would say, we don't keep the law perfectly. There's no way that we can do that. But we want you to do that, right? That doesn't even make sense. He says, so those who are circumcised, they don't keep the law themselves, but they desire to have you circumcised, that they may boast in your flesh, that they might be excited in you becoming what is called a proselyte, turning to the Jewish faith. They don't care necessarily about your soul. They care about the numbers. And we see that even today in a lot of churches where churches necessarily don't care about the souls. They care about the numbers. And that's kind of exactly where it was. And so they didn't care about their discipleship. They didn't care about their furthering in the gospel. They didn't care about their biblical growth. They just cared about how many people were changing their religion to Judaism and becoming a proselyte. And so here, Paul's just saying these guys are saying they can't even keep the law perfect themselves, but they want you to come to the law. That doesn't make sense. Salvation is by faith, not faith in this, because they can't even do this, but they're trying to sell you on works. And they themselves tell you they cannot do works perfectly. So works is not enough. It is only by faith. For neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creation. Your works does not matter. The only thing that matters is that you are a new creation. And we see many times, and we've read through the Gospels, through Romans, through 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, that we are made a new creation in what? When we have faith in Jesus. It is the work of the cross that makes us a new person. And so it doesn't matter what you do, it matters who you know. And as for all who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon you and upon the Israel of God. To all who follow this, you will have you have peace, mercy, and grace. And so hope that makes sense. It's a great kind of ending to the book of Galatians, that salvation is by faith and not by works. And now as we move into the book of Ephesians tomorrow, they take this to an extreme, right? And they say this idea that salvation is by faith. Well, I can do anything. And so Paul has to answer to the opposite extreme. And so we will get into Ephesians chapter 1 tomorrow. God bless.